Hi, and thanks for joining us for our intimate one-on-one chat with David Rubinger, Israel's preeminent photojournalist. We sat down with David to discuss his new autobiography, Israel Through My Lens, published by Abbeville Press and co-authored by Ruth Corman. The book covers Mr. Rubinger's time documenting everything from the Six-Day War to life in Hollywood and life in the White House. This author interview will be the first of many podcasts featured on the Abbeville Press homepage and in your iTunes inbox. So thank you for joining us for our maiden voyage. And be sure to watch your screen as I will periodically display images of some of Rubinger's most memorable photos. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the interview. I guess we'll just start with, could you tell me about your first camera? I think there's a great story about how you got it and what your first picture was.
My first picture, the first picture I can hardly remember. Must have been taken with a little camera I got from the French girl. That was one of those little love affairs one has when he's in the army. And a pal of mine from the army, we had tickets to the opera, but we were late and they wouldn't let us in. So we went around the corner into a bar for a drink, and there were two lovely girls there. And we never went to the opera that night. We became quite close, and I saw her quite frequently whenever I could dash off to Paris from where I was stationed in Belgium. And in the end, when I had to go back to Palestine, she came to the railway station and gave me a little present, a camera, an Argus camera. That's one of the very, very first and old 35mm cameras.
Right.
And it was the first camera I've ever had in my life. I never had a camera before in my life.
And you never had any interest in photography before that?
No, nothing. I never had
that's
anything to. I never took a picture. And by that time I was 21 years of age. So I fell in love with the girl, and then I fell in love with the camera. And I must have shot my first pictures in the kibbutz. I still have the negatives.
You came to British Palestine in 1939, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a rather interesting story. I think our listeners or future listeners would find the kind of story of your life on the kibbutz rather interesting. What was that like?
I was a very, very idealistic and dedicated kibbutz member. I believed in a communal life. I was a through and through socialist to the bone, and believed in bettering the world and utopia and all that. By the way, in Israel, it's a funny thing. You can tell most anybody after a short talk with him, or after shortly coming to know him, whether this person has ever lived on a kibbutz or not.
Really?
There's something that remains with you after living in a community, in a communal life.
I thought maybe we could move to the book a little bit. So the book opens in quite a dramatic fashion.
That was that. Yeah, in a way, that probably was one of the things that really made it happen, because I suddenly saw myself in the limelight of the press. You know, Normally, if a woman is murdered, you get about 6 lines in the daily paper somewhere on the page 17 or something. Woman murdered in Jerusalem, right? But because I was well known, and I had received the Israel Prize, and I was well known, so this became headline stuff and magazine cover stuff in Israel. So that was so traumatic for me that it pushed me into thinking, and probably that it was that which was the, shall we say, the touchstone upon which the whole thing developed.
So my next question was going to be how this event affected kind of the trajectory of your life and the project specifically, but I guess you could almost say that the book wouldn't have happened without this event.
You could say that, yes, you could say that. It might not have happened. You're right. Well, look, I was married for 54 years with my wife. We had a very, very good marriage. She lived to see not only grandchildren, but even great-grandchildren. And she died in 2000 of cancer. And at the age 73, and after 54 years of marriage, it's a long time. And then about 2 years later, by sheer chance, met this lady, Zion. And we had, when you're late in life, you find somebody that you really get along with. How old was I when I met her? I think I met her in '04. I was about 78, 79. And yeah, I must have been when she's there. Yeah. I met her and we had 2 wonderful, wonderful years. Because when you are ripe and my age, you're probably very young. When you're my age, at that time, your attitudes, a couple's attitude to each other become totally different because you're so much more tolerant at my age,
Really?
You don't, of course, because you don't, I don't know, how old are you, may I?
Yes, I'm 24.
24. Now, when you're 24 and you have a boyfriend or you're going to get married, I don't know which, but always he will want to change you in his image and you will
Right.
want to change him in your image. In other words, we used to quarrel only about one thing, about my driving. He used to say, oh, why do you crawl into the other guy's backside, Why can't you keep your distance from the other car? And I say, Luciana, I warn you of one thing. Tomorrow morning I'm taking the car into the garage and I'm having them turn around the seat next to me. You'll be facing backwards.
The book sort of has two main threads, war and immigration. And your photos have created such a valuable record of the Israeli population's growth. And you document this experience of immigrants in the 1950s. And how does that kind of compare to the Israeli immigrants' experience now?
Oh, now Israel has grown. Don't forget one thing. Israel started off when Israel was founded in 1948. You wouldn't believe it. There were all of 600,000 people here. That's what? That's 1/10 of New York City, I think, isn't it? New York has about 6 million people, right? 1,000 people created within 60 years. It became a nation of 7 million. It's got one of the leading high-tech industries. It has, of course, it has a very strong army. Unfortunately, it has to be strong. I wish it wasn't, but it has. It's really unfair to compare then and now because it's so different and the achievement is so huge that with all the faults that Israel has today, and there are many faults and there are many things that I don't agree with and the policies and so, but you must never forget the achievement is unprecedented in history. 600,000 people to create a state like this in 60 years, I think it's even relatively faster and greater than what the United States did in 200 years. And that's my feeling about Israel. So with all my criticism, and I have a lot of criticism about policies and so, but I never forget that.
You can't deny that kind of accomplishment
Exactly.
in such a short time. You became friends with a lot of your, I guess you could say, subjects. As a photographer,
Yes.
did you find it was necessary to put politics out of your mind? How did you kind of navigate
I
being
navigated
friends with politicians, I guess?
very openly, and they respected it. Look, I don't know if you saw in the book, there's one sentence where Sharon, who definitely was not of my political conviction, right? I was much more left-wing than he ever was. And but he once said when I was covering an event where I was invited, where I was the only photographer allowed into the room, and they were discussing campaign strategy about elections, And one of his advisors said, hey, we can't talk freely around here because he is here, and he points at me. And Sharon says, oh, I know David. I trust him. I know he doesn't vote for me.
That's a great story.
Yeah. So, and it's true because he said that. In other words, you can be respected by people even if you disagree with them, right? If you agree to disagree, then you can always respect people. Doesn't matter. And I had the same relationship with most leaders. The other thing I probably did, I think I was fair to most of my subjects, fair in the way that they did not publish things that shall we say, that didn't need